For most of my life, I was deeply dissatisfied with my circumstances. I didn't like the town where I had grown up. I felt alienated from society. I had envisioned a much different way of life for myself, and I felt that I needed to be in a different environment in order to really open up and find my passion, my creativity, my purpose. Eventually, I began traveling in search of a place where I might really feel at home, where I could settle my roots. And during those years, I would often find myself returning over and over again to the very place where I had started, back in the town where I had grown up with nothing to show for. Because whatever I had pursued, whatever dream I was chasing, wherever I found myself, nothing seemed to work out as I had hoped, and I would wind up not only financially broke, but feeling a little broken inside as well. Having to return to my starting point would feel like defeat, which was depressing. For a long time, I had been trying desperately to escape that place, and it felt as if something just kept pulling me back. But when I returned the most recent time, I decided to try a different approach. I wasn't going to resist the circumstances. I wasn't going to plot my escape. I was just going to embrace what was before me and look for any opportunity to grow from it. There's a saying that I heard once: bloom where you're planted. I had spent so much of my life trying to uproot myself, trying to bloom in every place except for the place where I was planted. And there had to be some reason why I was here, why this was the place where my parents had brought me to as a child. And if not necessarily a reason, at least some valuable lesson or opportunity which I had been avoiding. So I've since been in the process of discovering what I can learn from my current circumstances which are certainly not ideal, but which are persistent and seemingly inescapable. And I'm not saying that my circumstances can't change, but I have the sneaking suspicion that they won't change until I fully embrace them. That is, until I change my perspective concerning them. And that means having to release the very desire for something different. That means dropping the desperation to escape and giving my attention to the here and now. And instead of focusing on everything that I had found undesirable about these circumstances, looking for everything valuable that it has to offer me in the way of personal growth and opportunity. And at first it was challenging. Even though my intention was clear, there was still this thought that kept popping up in my mind. Where can I go? How can I get away from this place? But the more that I surrendered to just being here, the more I felt at peace, and the more it occurred to me that it really doesn't matter where I am. What matters is what I'm doing with what I have. And this is what I have. This is what I've been given. And I've been taking so much of it for granted. Shifting my perspective, I began to realize more and more how fortunate I was in so many regards. I started to appreciate things which I had overlooked, and even to appreciate things which I had previously disliked. I started to recognize that the situation afforded me certain opportunities to do some of the things that I had felt inspired to do, and that these opportunities were assisting me in opening up and expressing myself in ways which were deeply nourishing, and to share more with others. So I'm sharing this because I know there are a lot of people who are resistant to their circumstances and perhaps feel stuck. It seems like you couldn't escape if you wanted to. Maybe like me, you've tried to and you just wind back up at square one. Or maybe you've managed to move to a different place far away, a different city, a different state, a different country, only to find yourself in very much the same kind of situation. And maybe like me, you're wanting to open up and bloom, but you feel as though the place where you are does not provide the ideal conditions. It would seem that the best place for a flower to bloom would be in a meadow or at least a garden. But many of us have been planted in what seems to be a sterile or even toxic environment. We've been planted in a chaotic or polluted city where the soil seems to be depleted of nutrients. Or maybe we've been planted alongside thorns and weeds that compete for space and resources, which seem to drain us of the energy we need for growth. Or maybe we've been planted in the middle of an empty lot, in a crack in the concrete, where we find ourselves isolated and alone. Whatever the case may be, the truth is that our circumstances are exactly what we need for growth. Because unlike flowers, we don't all require the same nutrients. And unlike flowers, we can utilize anything, including toxins, in order to nurture our growth. So we need to look at our circumstances, and certainly we should appreciate whatever we find favorable in them. We should certainly give our attention to those things which we can truly be grateful for. But we should also look at every aspect which is undesirable and try to find the good in that as well. Something I've learned in life is that challenges, discomfort, and suffering have all been immensely valuable in helping me to grow. When there is something which we find displeasing, we need to ask ourselves what lesson it may have to teach us. And instead of asking what could be different about my circumstances, how can I be different? How can I respond differently? Because often it's not our circumstances that need changing as much as we do. And sometimes our circumstances simply won't change until we do. Everyone's circumstances are different, and that means our lessons are different. So it's up to you to figure out what those lessons may be for you. But the answer is often in the discomfort. And as much as we don't want to look at what is uncomfortable, we need to have the willingness to do just that. Because when we're willing to examine it, we can then come to understand it. And by understanding it, we can transcend it. So what happens if I stop resisting? What happens if I accept my situation? What happens if I embrace my situation and instead of focusing on everything I find wrong with it, I look for the things that are right? And even if it seems that there isn't much that I can appreciate about it as it is, maybe there are lessons within it that I can appreciate. But only if I have the willingness to learn and to grow from them. So I always come back to the question, what does this lesson have to teach me? How can I utilize this for my growth? And I think that this is the real secret to living a meaningful life. Not that we should need everything to be perfect, but that we can find value in everything. We keep trying to change ourselves by changing our circumstances. But if we don't change our own perspective, then it doesn't matter where we go or what we do. Because the quality of life depends on our perspective more than the situation. And it's our perspective which has the greatest influence on the situation. So we can make the best of what we've been given, or we can live in constant dissatisfaction. The choice is a matter of perspective. And if we're willing to take whatever opportunity can be found in this present situation, we might change the very quality of our life. We might discover a kind of inner satisfaction, a deep serenity which doesn't depend on circumstance, and which radiates outward into the world around us. And I think that this is what it really means to bloom, to be in a state of continual growth and expansion. If you find this content valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.